Jake had been delivering pizzas for Tony's Pizzeria for 5 years. It was a routine Friday night with orders pouring in from regular customers and the usual rush hour madness. However, around 8:30 p.m. as the night began to wane, an order popped up on the system that caught Jake's eye. It was a simple order for a large pepperoni pizza, but the address was what puzzled him. It was for 47 Wisteria Lane, a location Jake couldn't recall ever delivering to, despite knowing almost every corner of the town like the back of his hand. Thinking it might just be a new tenant or a slip of his memory, Jake shrugged it off, packed the pizza, and set off. Navigating through the familiar streets, Jake's GPS guided him towards a dimly lit alley that branched off from the main road. The alley opened up to reveal a row of old Victorian houses, each exuding an aura of tales untold. But 47 Wisteria Lane was peculiar even among them. The house was partly covered in ivy, its windows dusty and its wooden facade slightly worn out, making it look like it hadn't been inhabited for years. Jake double-checked the address, and sure enough it matched. With a curious sense of unease, he knocked gently on the aged wooden door. Moments later, the door creaked open to reveal a frail elderly woman, her silver hair tied into a bun and her eyes carrying a hint of surprise. "You ordered a pizza?" Jake asked hesitantly. Mrs. Hazel, as he'd soon learn her name, looked at the pizza box, then at Jake, her eyes widening in disbelief. "I didn't," she whispered. "But come in, young man. I believe there's a story behind this pizza." Jake, usually adhering to the policy of never entering a customer's home, felt an unusual compulsion to hear her out. Stepping into the vintage living room, Jake set the pizza on a table and turned his attention to Mrs. Hazel. She was already flipping through an old diary, her fingers trembling with anticipation. The house, filled with old photographs and memories, seemed to echo the stories of days gone by. The ticking of the grandfather clock provided a rhythmic backdrop as Jake waited, eager to unravel the mystery of the unexpected order. As Mrs. Hazel turned the pages, Jake's eyes darted around the room. Every nook and corner seemed to hold a relic of a time gone by. A sepia-toned photograph caught his attention. A young woman and a man, both in what looked like 1940s attire, stood next to a young tree, smiles lighting up their faces. "That's me," Mrs. Hazel's voice cut through his thoughts, pointing to the young woman in the photograph. "And that's Robert," she said softly, pointing to the man beside her. Jake looked up, seeing the twinkle in Mrs. Hazel's eyes as she began her tale. "Robert and I lived on this very lane all our lives. As youngsters, we had a peculiar tradition. Every Friday evening, we would order a pepperoni pizza from Old Joe's Pizzeria. It was our little secret, a cherished ritual." As Mrs. Hazel narrated her story, Jake learned that Old Joe's Pizzeria was the predecessor to Tony's Pizzeria. The tradition had continued for years until one fateful day when Robert had to leave for the war. Before leaving, he promised Mrs. Hazel that he would order a pizza every Friday from wherever he was, just to let her know he was thinking of her. The pizza stopped coming after a few months. Mrs. Hazel's voice faltered, tears forming in her eyes. Robert never returned from the war. Jake felt a lump in his throat. He tried piecing together the puzzle. But why did the pizza arrive today? Mrs. Hazel looked down at the diary, her fingers tracing a particular entry. "Today marks 75 years since Robert left," she whispered. "I always hoped he'd come back, and every Friday since his departure I've waited for a pizza, though they stopped coming long ago." Jake pulled out the receipt from his pocket, examining it closely. The order was made from an unknown number, and under special instructions it read, "For Hazel, with love." The two sat in silence for a while, the weight of decades of waiting and the mystery of the unexpected pizza filling the room. The pizza, now cold, remained untouched, but its presence seemed to bridge the gap between the past and the present, rekindling memories and reawakening hopes. The ticking of the old grandfather clock echoed through the room. It was Mrs. Hazel's story time, and Jake was an eager listener. She had decided to share more about Robert, drawing from the bittersweet memories of the past. "Robert always had a way with surprises," she began, her voice soft. "During the initial months he was away, I'd sometimes find little notes hidden in the pizza boxes, just tiny messages telling me he was safe and thinking of me. It was our way of communicating." As she spoke, Jake wondered about the circumstances of the mysterious pizza order. Who could have placed it? Could it have been a relative or maybe someone who knew their story? The message in the special instructions had an intimacy about it. Mrs. Hazel seemed to read his thoughts. "You're wondering who sent the pizza, aren't you?" she asked with a gentle smile. Jake nodded. She continued, "Last year, on the 74th anniversary of Robert's departure, I had an unexpected visitor. It was a young woman claiming to be the granddaughter of Robert's comrade from the war. She had found a collection of letters Robert had written but never sent, and they detailed our pizza tradition and his undying love for me." Jake leaned forward, absorbing every word. "She handed me the bundle of letters along with a tiny package. Inside was a medal of valor and a note. The note was from her grandfather explaining that Robert had saved his life during the war, sacrificing his own in the process." Tears streamed down Mrs. Hazel's face. "She told me Robert's last wish was for the tradition to continue, even if he wasn't around. But I never received a pizza last year." The pieces of the puzzle began to fit. Jake looked at the receipt again, this time noticing a name printed at the bottom. Cashier Emily. He remembered Tony mentioning a new employee named Emily who had recently started working at the pizzeria. "Mrs. Hazel," Jake whispered, "I think I know who sent the pizza. Tomorrow let's pay a visit to the pizzeria. I believe it's time for 2 generations to meet." As the evening shadows lengthened, Mrs. Hazel and Jake sat together, united by a story of love and longing, waiting for another chapter to unfold. The pizzeria's ambient light dimmed as Jake and Mrs. Hazel entered. An eerie silence hung in the air, replacing the usual bustling sounds. As they approached Tony, he looked at them with an expression that was unreadable yet unmistakably tense. "Where's Emily?" Jake demanded, sensing that something was amiss. Tony glanced around, seemingly ensuring no one was within earshot before leaning in. "I never hired anyone named Emily," he whispered, a grave expression on his face. Mrs. Hazel's eyes filled with confusion and terror. "But the pizza? The note?" Tony led them to the back room, revealing a wall covered with old newspaper clippings. The headlines read, "Mysterious disappearances, delivery drivers vanish without a trace." Below each headline was a picture of a missing driver. Tony looked at Jake and Mrs. Hazel with a mix of sorrow and fear. He pointed to one of the older newspaper clippings, showing a much younger version of Jake, dated several decades ago. "Recognize him?" he whispered. Jake's eyes widened in disbelief. That's me." But the date made no sense. It was from 30 years ago. Mrs. Hazel, trembling, pointed to another clipping. "And that's you, Tony." Tony sighed heavily. "I remember delivering a pizza just like you, Jake. To an old house, then nothing until I was here, working in this pizzeria as if nothing had happened." The memories began flooding back for Jake, memories of another life, another time. The chilling realization hit him. "I never came back from that delivery, neither did you, Tony," Mrs. Hazel gasped, connecting the dots. "The woman, she wasn't inviting me in. She was trying to warn me, save me," Tony whispered, his voice breaking. "We're all trapped, forever delivering, forever lost." The digital clock on the counter read 11:57 p.m. when the phone rang at Gino's Pizzeria. The soft hum of the ovens and the distant echo of late-night traffic outside were interrupted by its shrill cry. Martin, a middle-aged man with streaks of gray in his hair, wiped his hands on his apron. "Who orders a pizza 3 minutes before closing?" he grumbled, but picked up the phone nonetheless. "Gino's, what can I get you?" A raspy, almost hesitant voice responded. "A large margarita, thin crust, please, it's important." Martin rolled his eyes. "Your address?" As the caller mentioned a local street name, Martin froze. He knew that address. It was that house, the place where 20 years ago a tragic event changed the course of his life. A shiver went down his spine, but he scribbled down the details. "Give me 30 minutes, he mumbled, more to himself than the customer. After preparing the pizza, he hopped into his old car, the weight of his past heavy on his shoulders. The house was just as he remembered, an old Victorian home, paint chipping, surrounded by an aura of sorrow. As he approached with the pizza box, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit hallway. A figure shadowed in the darkness whispered, "Leave it on the step." But Martin needed answers. Taking a deep breath, he ventured, "I know this place. Why did you call me here?" The figure stepped into the faint light, revealing a familiar face aged by time, eyes filled with regret. "To settle an old debt," the man replied. The digital clock on the counter blinked steadily, showcasing the time as 11:57 p.m. Gino's Pizzeria was awash in a warm golden glow from the overhead lights, highlighting the polished counter and the softly humming ovens. Outside, the late-night traffic murmured, a distant whisper in the otherwise quiet street. Martin, with his weathered face and streaks of gray hair, was just about to lock up. His hands, stained with flour, paused midway as he cleaned the counters. The unexpected ringing of the phone broke the soothing monotony of his routine. With a sigh, he muttered, "Who on earth orders pizza 3 minutes before closing?" Yet habit made him reach for the receiver. "Gino's, how can I assist?" There was a brief silence before a raspy voice, trembling slightly, spoke. "I'd like a large margarita, thin crust. It's rather urgent." Raising an eyebrow, Martin responded, "Sure thing. Address?" As the caller mentioned the street name and house number, Martin's hands grew cold, gripping the pen tighter. The address was all too familiar. It was that house, the place that had haunted his dreams for 20 years. Memories of a tragic event that had forever changed his life flashed before his eyes. With a sense of trepidation, he noted down the details. "It will be about 30 minutes, he managed to say, voice slightly strained. Once the pizza was ready, he hesitated only for a moment before grabbing his jacket. Settling into his old car, the journey was a whirl of memories, the past bleeding into the present. The house, when he reached it, stood as a testament to time, an old Victorian structure with peeling paint and shadowed windows. Gathering his courage, he approached with the warm pizza box. As he neared, the front door groaned open slowly, revealing only the faintest sliver of the dimly lit hallway. A silhouette in the threshold murmured, "Place it on the step." Martin, however, wasn't about to leave without confronting his past. "I recognize this place, and I think I recognize you," he called out, tension evident in his voice. "Why bring me here after all these years?" The shadowed figure hesitated before stepping into the pale moonlight. Time had carved lines onto a face Martin knew all too well. But the eyes were the same, filled with a mix of regret and desperation. "Martin," the man whispered, "we have a past to confront and an old debt to settle." The night air grew colder, as Martin and the figure, whose face was now illuminated as Robert, stood facing each other. Robert's house, known locally as the Mansion of Sorrows, had been the epicenter of a tragic event 2 decades ago. A fire had consumed the house, taking with it several lives, including Robert's young daughter, Lily. Martin's eyes, filled with a combination of anger and pain, locked onto Robert. "You disappeared after the fire. The entire town believed you perished. How? Why now?" Robert, his voice choked with emotion, replied, "After the fire, I couldn't bear to face anyone. The guilt, the pain, it was overwhelming. I wandered for years, trying to find a place where the memories wouldn't haunt me. But they did, relentlessly." Martin's mind raced back to that fateful night. He had been at the mansion, delivering a pizza. While waiting at the door, he'd smelled smoke and heard screams from inside. The decrepit mansion seemed to come alive as Martin stepped further inside. The creaks and groans of the old structure echoed like whispering voices. The faded wallpaper, which depicted scenes of joyous family gatherings, now bore a sinister undertone. Robert led Martin to a dimly lit room where the centerpiece was a grand dining table. At its head was the open pizza box. Surprisingly, the pizza still steamed as though it had just come out of the oven. But its toppings were disconcertingly arranged to resemble a screaming face. Martin's pulse quickened. "What is this, Robert? Recognize her?" Robert's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Robert pointed to an old portrait on the wall. "Lily," Robert murmured, his voice shaking. "She never left this place. She was meant to be saved that night, Martin. But you never came back," Robert's voice echoed bitterly. The room's atmosphere grew increasingly stifling. Shadows danced on the walls, whispering tales of pain and regret. Martin began to hear faint, agonized screams, eerily reminiscent of the night of the fire. "Every night she screams, Martin. Every night I see her trapped, waiting for help that never came," Robert continued. From the dark corner of the room, a figure emerged. The dim light revealed Lily, but not as the young child. Her skin was charred, eyes hollow, clothes singed, and her steps left behind a trail of ash. "Why, Daddy?" Her voice, distorted by pain and time, was a heartbreaking lament. "Why did you leave me?" Frozen in terror, Martin whispered, "I didn't know. I thought everyone got out." Robert stepped forward, his face contorted in anguish. "You promised to check, Martin. You said you'd make sure everyone was safe." Suddenly, the room erupted in a cacophony of agonized wails. Emerging from the shadows were other victims of the fire, their burnt forms a terrifying testament to the past neglect. Lily approached the pizza, her small hand reaching for a knife that lay nearby. With a swift, deliberate motion, she slashed the pizza, mimicking a throat being cut. As the sauce pooled out, so too did Martin feel his strength wane. "I may have been the loudest scream," Lily whispered, her gaze locked onto Martin's, "but I wasn't the only one you left behind." Martin's vision blurred as he collapsed, the weight of his guilt manifesting as a literal pressure on his chest. The room began to heat up rapidly, the smell of smoke growing stronger. Walls of fire rose, encircling them. The flames vanished as quickly as they appeared, leaving nothing but a darkened room. The moment the address 13 Elmwood Lane flashed across my delivery screen, an uneasy feeling settled in my gut. Elmwood Lane was infamous among us delivery drivers. It was said that houses on that lane held dark secrets and even darker inhabitants. I had heard stories, tales shared over slices at the pizzeria after a long shift, of drivers who went there and came back, changed. But I was a rational person and I told myself stories were just stories. I steered my car onto Elmwood Lane, its headlights piercing through the evening mist. The houses, spaced out and secluded, loomed like ancient sentinels guarding their realm. The trees overhead seemed to close in, their branches weaving a canopy that blocked out the starry night, making the lane feel even more isolated. As I approached number 13, I noted that it was the last house on the lane, bordered by a dense forest on one side and a sheer drop into a ravine on the other. The residence itself was imposing, a sprawling Victorian relic that had clearly seen better days. Its windows, some broken, stared blankly out, like dead eyes watching my every move. Taking a deep breath, I parked the car and grabbed the pizza box. The scent of the pizza, a meat lover's special if memory served, felt out of place here. It was a comforting aroma that seemed at odds with the eeriness around me. Reaching the front door, I took a moment to examine it. It was old, weathered, with faded paint peeling away. There was a door knocker shaped like a lion's head, its eyes seeming to follow me. Mustering my courage, I knocked. There was no immediate answer, but I could hear faint whispers from inside, hushed but urgent. A chill ran down my spine. The stories about Elmwood Lane might be exaggerated, but the unsettling feeling this place gave off was very real. I contemplated leaving the pizza on the doorstep and fleeing, but professionalism and the promise of a potential tip rooted me to the spot. When the door finally creaked open, revealing the dimly lit interior and a figure obscured in shadows, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I had just stepped into a trap. As the door inched open, a sliver of pale light spilled out, illuminating a thin, elderly woman with sharp, angular features. She wore a faded floral dress, and her silvery hair was knotted in a tight bun. Her eyes, however, were the most striking. They were a piercing ice blue which contrasted with her sallow complexion. "Ah, the pizza," she whispered, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "You're later than I expected." "I apologize for the delay, ma'am," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Had some trouble finding the place." She studied me for a moment longer than I was comfortable with before finally saying, "Come in, I have the money in the other room." Everything in me screamed not to enter, but the forcefulness in her eyes was compelling. Before I realized it, I found myself stepping over the threshold. The interior of the house was dark, save for the dim glow of candles placed sporadically throughout. The air was thick with the scent of old books, mold, and something else I couldn't quite place, a metallic, coppery aroma. Antique furniture adorned the place, each piece looking like it hadn't been touched in decades. She led me through a winding hallway, the wooden floorboards groaning with each step. Old portraits lined the walls, their eyes seemingly following us. I tried to avoid looking directly at them. They were of people, presumably her ancestors, and every portrait had an identical ice blue set of eyes. We reached a room at the end of the corridor. The elderly woman gestured for me to wait and disappeared through another door. As I stood there, the atmosphere grew heavier. I could hear muffled voices from the room she entered. It sounded like a heated conversation, punctuated by the occasional shout. Curiosity getting the better of me, I took a step closer, trying to make out the words. "Can't keep doing this. He's just a boy. Not like the others," one voice argued. Another, deeper voice retorted, "It's the only way, it's for the family." Suddenly, a sharp cry echoed through the room. My heart raced, adrenaline pumping through my veins. Every instinct told me to get out. I turned on my heels, making for the front door, but as I did, I bumped into a table, knocking over a framed photograph. The picture, now lying face up, showed the elderly woman, much younger, standing beside a man and a boy, both bearing those familiar ice-blue eyes. Scribbled at the bottom were the words, "The Last of the Elmwoods." I grabbed the pizza box and bolted, but before I could reach the exit, the other door burst open. A large figure loomed in the doorway, his features hidden in shadows but his chilling ice-blue eyes visible. It was clear they weren't going to let me leave without a fight. The large figure approached, every step echoing ominously in the dimly lit hallway. Behind him, the elderly woman appeared, her frail form juxtaposed against his imposing size. "Leaving so soon?" the woman cackled, her voice dripping with malice. "We haven't even paid you yet." "I'm good, thanks," I replied, my voice trembling, searching frantically for an escape route. I noticed an old window to my right, but it was sealed shut. The only way out was past the behemoth and the wicked old lady. The man took another step forward, revealing his face under the candlelight, scarred and rugged, with those haunting blue eyes dominating his features. I could see now he was older, maybe in his 50s, but his build spoke of brute strength. "Young man," the woman began, her tone deceptively sweet, "you've stumbled upon our little secret. For generations the Elmwoods have had a peculiar taste. Most call it taboo, but we call it legacy." My mind raced, piecing together the grim hints from earlier. The metallic smell, the conversation about the only way, the family portrait. It all pointed to something sinister. The Elmwoods had a dark appetite. Seeing my realization, the man smirked. "That pizza isn't the only thing getting sliced tonight." Panic surged. I had to think fast. Remembering the table I'd bumped into, I lunged for it, grabbing a heavy, ornate candle holder. Swinging it with all my might, I managed to strike the large man on the side of his head. He staggered, momentarily dazed. I didn't wait. Pushing past the woman, who shrieked in fury, I dashed to the front door. It took an agonizing moment to undo the multiple locks, but finally the cold outside air hit my face, and I sprinted as if my life depended on it, because it did. I could hear them shouting, the man roaring in anger and pain. Their voices became faint as I put distance between us. When I reached the main road, a passing car screeched to a halt, the driver wide-eyed at my panicked state. Breathing heavily, I relayed a shortened version of my ordeal. The driver, a local, paled when he heard the name Elmwood. "Those folks have been the stuff of legends around here," he muttered, glancing nervously at the darkened path I'd emerged from. "Some say they've been around for centuries, kidnapping unlucky souls who stray too close. I called the cops, but when they investigated, the house was empty, as if no one had lived there for years. The portraits, the candles, all gone. The only evidence of my ordeal was the pizza box, discarded on the floor. I quit my delivery job that night, haunted by the chilling legacy of the Elmwoods. Every time I see those ice-blue eyes in my nightmares, I'm reminded of how close I came to becoming a part of their twisted family feast. The night was ordinary as far as Thursday nights go. Calls came in, pizzas went out. Tips were collected, and the humdrum of the pizza place's kitchen created a comfortable background noise. But as the clock neared midnight, a call changed the course of the evening. 14 Orchard Street, the voice on the other end whispered, urgency apparent. Before I could confirm the order details, the line went dead. "Hey, Rick," I called out to my manager, holding up the order slip. "Ever heard of a 14 Orchard Street?" Rick, wiping sauce from his hands, frowned. "Orchard Street? Sure, it's a few blocks from here, but there's no number 14. Goes from 12 to 16. Curiosity piqued, I decided to take the order myself. I thought it might be a simple misunderstanding, a miscommunication, maybe even a prank. But the whisper, the urgency in that voice played in my mind. The address might be odd, but something about that call felt genuine. The GPS failed to recognize the address, constantly redirecting me. Relying on memory, I turned onto Orchard Street, a quiet residential area I'd been to many times. Houses stood in silent rows, interrupted only by the pale glow of the streetlights. As I passed house number 12, a narrow alley beckoned, obscured by overgrown trees and ivy, almost as if the town itself had forgotten its existence. The alley opened up to reveal an old building, seemingly out of place amidst the residential houses. The rusty plaque on the gate read, 14 Orchard Street. From the looks of it, no one had ventured here in years, yet a dim light flickered from one of the windows, and as the wind whispered for a fleeting moment, it carried the faint aroma of freshly baked pizza, urging me onward. The overgrowth seemed intent on keeping the building a secret, like nature itself was warning against entry. Despite this, the unmistakable sound of faint laughter and murmurs emanated from inside, contrasting the eerie quiet of Orchard Street. I cautiously approached the old wooden door, half expecting it to creak open on its own. Instead, there was silence. No doorbell in sight. I gave 3 tentative knocks. The murmurs ceased abruptly. The silence felt thick, the weight of anticipation pressing down on me. I clutched the warm pizza box tighter, regretting my decision to explore this place based on a vague phone call. Then the door opened slowly, revealing a dimly lit hallway and a slender figure. She was an older woman, her frail form draped in a faded floral dress. Strands of silver hair framed a face that might have once been pretty, but now appeared worn and tired. Her eyes, however, were piercing and alert, scrutinizing me intently. "You came," she whispered, her voice trembling but not from fear. "I didn't think anyone would." "Ma'am," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I got a call for a pizza delivery to this address." She nodded slowly. "Yes, I called. Please come in." Reluctantly, I stepped inside, the scent of mold and decay assaulting my nostrils. The interior looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, with faded wallpaper peeling from the walls and old photographs covered in dust. The only sign of life was a table set for 2 in the dining area, complete with lit candles. "My son, he loved pizza," she began, her gaze distant. "We used to order every Thursday night, just like tonight. It was our little tradition until he went missing." I felt a pang of sympathy but also unease. Why call now? Why this hidden house? And where were those murmurs coming from? "Please place the pizza on the table," she instructed. As I set it down, I noticed another door slightly ajar leading to a basement. From below, muffled sounds. Voices could be heard. Before I could ask about it, she pressed a wad of bills into my hand. "Thank you," she murmured, guiding me back to the entrance. But as I reached the door, it slammed shut. I whirled around, panic rising. The old woman's eyes weren't sorrowful now, they were cold, predatory. Behind her, the basement door creaked open wider, and a larger, burly figure stepped into the dim light, a malicious grin spreading across his face. "My son always did love pizza night," she said with a chilling smile, "and tonight he's very hungry." The adrenaline kicked in instantly. I lunged for the door, but the large figure was quicker, intercepting me with ease. His cold hands grasped my arm with vice-like intensity. In the dim light, I caught a glimpse of a scar that ran from his temple to his chin, giving him a permanently twisted grin. "Why the hell did you bring me here?" I shouted, trying to wrestle free. The old woman approached, her delicate fingers caressing the edge of the pizza box. "Every so often we need to feed him. He's particular about his meals." From the shadows of the basement, a chilling growl echoed, each note dripping with insatiable hunger and madness. The weight of its depth was enough to paralyze me with fear. I could almost feel the icy grip of dread constricting my chest, each heartbeat echoing louder in my ears. The burly man laughed, a sound more sinister than mirthful. "Oh, Jonah is especially impatient tonight." As he pushed me further into the room, a macabre spectacle awaited. The basement was dominated by rows of gargantuan glass containers, each filled with a murky liquid that seemed to pulse with a dim, otherworldly glow. Suspended within these liquid tombs were figures, humans, their eyes wide open, mouths agape in silent screams. Horror gnawed at me as I recognized some of the faces. They were delivery drivers from around the town, representing various services, their uniforms a stark reminder of their final moments of normalcy. Cold realization settled in my bones. The pizza wasn't their meal, it was merely a lure, a means to an end. I was their intended feast. Desperation fueled me, and I tried to make a break for it. But before I could take more than a few steps, a swift, harsh blow to the back of my head sent the world spinning. Dizzy and disoriented, I collapsed, only to be met by the glinting eyes of an elderly woman. Her hands, drenched in a crimson hue, played with a wicked-looking syringe. "Another delightful piece for my collection," she cooed, her voice cold, betraying an unnerving sense of satisfaction. My vision blurred, but the truth was all too clear. This wasn't a cellar for storing preserves. It was a chamber of horrors designed to display her twisted trophies. As the needle pierced my skin, a numbing cold overtook me, the world dimming around the edges. The following day, the pizzeria found an envelope stuffed with cash at their door. Attached was a simple note, "Exceptional service as always, eagerly awaiting the next delivery." It bore no signature, only a sinister emblem of a dark looming orchard. In the shadows of the night, if our tales from unsettling horror stories gave you a fright, press like and let it be known. Subscribe, so you're never alone in this haunting journey, and share, so others too can be wary. Until our next sinister tale, stay dark, dear listener.